Yeah, Trapper. Yeah. So she's becoming more dominant and play with Trapper.
And then it's getting Trap to react in a not so great way, which I understand. She's like really pushy.
Okay.
So she'll do the typical like, okay, she'll do the typical like go behind the neck and like put her head here and
Yep.
push and like how far can I go? Kind of
Oh.
like acting very dominant, and then she'll try and hump him,
Mm-hmm.
which he doesn't obviously like that. So I don't understand like why she's doing that, because Trap's not a very pushy dog, like a pushover. I mean, like he'll tell her off if he needs to. It's the other two that don't.
Yeah, they don't care.
They don't care. But
Well,
I don't know.
the first thing that came to my mind is if it walks like a duck, if it talks like a duck, it's a duck. So you've obviously clearly identified her showing dominant behavior. She's a golden retriever. Now, I mean, this doesn't really supersede, or it doesn't really gets overlooked by a dog by their breed, but every dog can show dominance tendencies, and then I guess depending on what happens at home should determine your next steps. So she's been doing this now. What happens?
She gets a good correction from me, like a touch correction, because I don't always have all her gear on right when it happens.
What happens with her and Trapper though? What does Trapper do?
Trap will turn around and he'll like put his mouth over her mouth, like and like kind of growl at her.
Okay.
And he'll walk away from her, so he kind of like de-escalates the situation.
Yes,
like,
he's
hey,
de-escalating.
it's not cool, and then he'll walk away.
Yeah.
But she doesn't always get those cues, or if she does get them, she doesn't give a shit about them.
Yes.
So she'll keep pushing and pushing until either I interfere or Trap. One of them goes outside.
Yes. I think at the end of the day, like most people, because I've had this conversation with the client this week on the phone too, but essentially, like, I feel like from what I've seen is that it normally starts off as like a dog throwing their weight around, or like a dog testing their limits and challenging. It could always obviously progress to like more disputes where the dogs are kind of like, well, it could lead to a dispute where if the dog that is being dominated is like, I'm not going to have it, then you're going to have kind of some real good back and forth snapping, and then sometimes it could lead to like fights, altercations. Yeah, it could lead to that. In other cases, like for example, if she was to do it with the other two dogs, they would be like, okay, whatever you say, man. We'll do whatever you want to do, and they'll take that seat. So it's like, how do we take a dog off sort of the mantle they're creating or building, or that they're already on, right? And honestly, it comes down to a lot of small battles being won, whether it's in favor for the dog or whether it's in favor of the other dog, or you as the leader situation. And so I mean, at the end of the day, if it's more so on guidance on what you should do, if you're noticing it, yeah, definitely pipe up about it. Don't allow it, because we don't want there to be that snowball effect, right? Where it starts off small and she's pushing, throwing her weight, challenging, until then she maybe goes a little too overboard because she's very excited, or depending on the situation what's going on, and then Chopper's like, I don't like this. Now, is it to say, will she fight back? I don't know, because Trapper seems like quite the OG that like he could, if he really wanted to go, he'll go. It sounds like. I don't. Yeah, yeah. So so will there be a back and forth fight? I'm not sure. I would like to think not, because Trapper, I feel like if he wants to turn it on, he'll turn it on. But do we want to get to that point? Not really. So obviously you're going to be a little bit more proactive about it. That's why you, as leader and as the person to manage the situation, obviously that's just you being on top of it. You can't speak for other people that are in your house, but at least for you, that is definitely something that you have to stay on top of. And because you've noticed it, yeah, like you definitely don't want it to manifest into something much more. And I think that's where people just run into problems, is that every dog has these tendencies, and every dog has like these types of characteristics. But the problem where people run into is that first thing is that maybe they're not able to identify it and they can't decipher between play or whatever, but also they just do nothing to manage that. And then it snowballs, and then it's a bigger issue on the back end later on. So the fact that you've identified it and that, I mean, honestly, it's just continuously doing what you're doing and being aware.
What should I do when
You're
she
gonna,
does that dominant thing to Trapper with, you know what I'm talking about, where she goes kind of off to the side and then puts her neck or her head behind Trapper's neck, kind of like chest up, and you know what I'm talking
yeah,
about?
over the shoulder dominance.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
She did that yesterday, and I'm like, I've never seen her do that. She might have done it, if they were playing in the backyard or something, I might have missed it, but that's the first time I've seen her do it. I'm like, what is this? Because it's
Yeah.
so easily missed.
Yeah.
Oh, my dogs are just playing.
Well, that's the thing.
Oh, that's not.
That's exactly what I was saying. People are not able to identify it.
Yeah.
But what do I do? What I do is any form of physical correction, so some really strong, good positive punishment, and where it's very direct, so the dog knows that I'm correcting the dog, and it's not like a correction from left field or out of space. That's what I do to let the dog know that it's unwanted behavior, but timing's huge. So as the dog is in that behavior, I want to make sure I'm correcting it right there and then.
That's what I did.
If you miss that window, you miss the window.
Yeah, like right when I saw her going to do it, I was and I gave her like a pretty hearty like touch correction right in the
Yeah.
ribs. Like it probably hurt.
Yeah, yeah.
My knuckles out.
Yeah, yeah. Again, when we're punishing unwanted behaviors, we want you to be less likely to exhibit that behavior again. So it's gotta suck. It's gotta be aversive, right? So that's what I would do, and it's just that's part of that management wheel and cycle of everything with our dogs that we're doing, right? That's part of management. Management is not only rewarding good behaviors that we need, but punishing behaviors that are unwanted, right? So. But you're doing the right thing. You just got to be on it. As long as you've identified it, then you're good. If it was a question of like, what does this mean, then I will explain to you. But you know exactly what it means, so it's just staying on top of it. Okay, so I just want to round things off a little bit with the discussion that you were watching here, for you guys at home listening and trying to get a grasp on what you have going on at home, right? And what you're facing, what you're dealing with. I just want to make sure I kind of give you an understanding and template of how to go about this. Every situation is going to be very different, so this is going to be very blanket general advice. There are solutions to this form of issue if you're facing this at home when it comes to dominance between two dogs or more at home if you are more than one dog household. The first one is you need to be able to identify it. And I'm going to maybe put a quick little compilation of videos as I'm talking here to kind of show you some certain signs of dominance or like, again, characteristics of it. Generally, I feel like people are generally good at figuring this out and knowing that your dog is being a little bit pushy with some of your other dogs. But clear tell signs that there are some form of a dominance occurring, like marking, right? If one of your dogs is just completely marking on a lot of certain items in particular or all items, that could be a sign of just some overall dominant characteristics in that specific dog. Doesn't necessarily mean they're being dominant over one dog, but specifically in that dog, they're showing some general dominant behavior and characteristics, so they're capable of exhibiting dominance, whether it's with your dogs or other dogs down the road or just in general. Another aspect would be if your dog tends to like to mount and kind of hover over a dog, especially around the neck and head area, on their back, right? And they're jumping up on your dog and always kind of, again, hovering over, sort of like somewhat of like a pinning look to it. That is dominance. And obviously in that particular scenario or situations, your dog is dominating the other said dog. And so noticing things like that. Another one too is if you just find that if your dog is very keen on holding and guarding resource, be very mindful of that too. There is a place for resource guarding in a sense that it's very natural, and a lot of dogs do want to guard very valuable things. But to the point where, especially if they're hoarding it or hiding it in certain areas or certain places, where it leads to spatial, I call it dominance, right? Spatial resource guarding, where now certain areas, certain dogs are not allowed with value there or not there. Those are the things you want to be very mindful of, okay? The second portion to this is, and I want to say it should be in this order, is apart from the dominance, apart from any form of resource guarding, you need to work on obedience. Obedience is going to be key to help you figure out the situation and to alleviate a lot of those natural dominant characteristics that are occurring. If you have space in your dog's mind, meaning if the dog values you and respects you as the person that is in control and managing your entire environment, your entire home and household, then of course the dog is gonna follow suit. But the only way the dog's gonna follow that is if you've designed some form of training structure and obedience and just structure to their day, right? Are they free forming, free roaming all day long and doing what they want and pulling items from here and jumping up on count, do whatever they want with no rules? Or have you put some rules in place that they know that they have to live within, and that there's structured time for certain things? Maybe there's a structured place time where they have to stay on their beds and nap or whatever the case is, right? Is there structure in your home, and what does that look like? And of course, through obedience, you can create and build your obedience through obviously the very obvious common behaviors like sit down. Place is going to be a really good one too, right? But beyond just scales of doing place, sit down, and all these little behaviors, what does their structure look like? Is there even spatial boundaries? Are they allowed in every single room? Are there certain rooms that they shouldn't be allowed in because there's a lot of opportunities for resource guarding, valuable items in play, jealousy may occur, those sort of things, right? So that next step is working on your obedience, and you need to work on obedience with each specific dog. Every dog's different, every dog's learning different, and every dog is clearly going to be at a different level of obedience, but you need to get them all to a point where you essentially have a system in place of a set form of commands, a set form of 2 words that you're using to make sure that every dog is listening, one, learns and knows what the behaviors are, is listening when the behaviors are asked for, okay? And that's where you can say that every dog has some form of obedience, right? And that's gonna help with your management skills and with managing the environment, because if every dog is listening and understands the protocol to when you ask for certain behaviors, it's just gonna make your life that much easier. But if you have one dog that's super trained and your 2 or 1 or 3 other freaking dogs in your house have no clue or just have no wherewithal or have no means of doing what you're asking, then you're gonna feel like a human being with 6 different tentacles trying to control every dog all at once. And that's just gonna make your life harder for management. The last part is there has to be some very clear boundaries. And with clear boundaries, okay, you need to build and design some form of definitive answer of what you're going to allow and what you're not going to allow. Do not let things escalate. As I mentioned in the video that you watch, you do not want to create a snowball effect where we're letting the dogs just kind of do what they want to do and letting them figure it out. Now, there's times where they will figure it out, which is very normal and natural, which is fine. But I do feel like human intervention is going to be very important because it's just going to save you a lot of headache. If this was out in the wild and they're amongst themselves socializing, they'll figure it out. And if that means one of them loses a leg, one of them lost a leg, and that conversation's been dealt with. But we don't necessarily want to get there in our home. So we do have to be a little bit proactive. And this last third, let's call it pillar of building those boundaries, that, you know, it follows the order of obedience, but building boundaries where the dogs know what's allowed and what's not allowed. So if you allow play in your home, fine, but to what limit? And there has to be a very definitive limit. And also, when we talk about boundaries, if your dogs aren't just able to handle it, then I wouldn't encourage it at all in the home, at all. I, at one point in time, had 4 dogs in my house, don't ask me why. But I did. And I didn't allow any play in the house because they just were not capable of keeping it at a minimum level, all right? So What did I do? I completely essentially banned playing in the house. They could not run around, they could not be jumping up on each other and causing mayhem. And that worked perfectly great. Why? Because then when they're outside, they can run into the trees, they can flip each other on each other's backs. I could care less. But I made it very clear to the dogs that when we're inside, it is no play zone whatsoever. When we're outside, have at her. And what did it do in my household? It made everything very clear. And again, they still have that outlet to beat dogs, which is great. So building those boundaries and making sure that's known. And then when dogs step out of line, making sure that through your training and through what you've designed in communication with your dogs, that they understand that if they're out of line, there are going to be consequences for that, right? And making those things very clear. I feel like a lot of these situations that people have with their dogs being a little bit dominant over the other dogs and playing is getting too hard and too serious and too crazy. It's just because you're not really setting rules and we're just allowing the dogs to just behave as dogs as they please. But there has to be some form of management here. We have to lead them, we have to teach them, we have to guide them. And honestly, it's not necessarily a hard thing to fix, but you just gotta commit to it and you gotta do it. So if you have any questions, let us know. Shoot your questions in the comment section. If you like the video, like and subscribe. See you on the next one.